The family. One day your friends told you to take up yoga. You were convinced that yoga would help you with stress, but you joined Ann Hamilton Burns' yoga class. Instead of allowing you to release your inner tensions, she convinced you and everyone else in the class to join her quest to create a master race, believing that she was the second coming of Jesus when she could have actually just been Adolf Hitler reincarnated in a woman's body. Anne and her husband Bill became the leaders of a cult called The Family, based in Australia. They adopted and took custody of numerous children, often forcing single mothers into giving up their babies and using any other sketchy means to get their hands on kids. These kids were isolated from the rest of the world and were dressed the same to fit Anne's idea of a perfect child. Anne took it to another level when she subjected these children to cleansing experiments that made use of drugs like LSD and other hallucinogens. She wanted to break down their sense of reality and force them to adopt her visions and ideas. However, she failed to make the perfect race when authorities witnessed her actions in the 1980s. Her arrest ended her Nazi-like reign of terror over children and adults alike. Church of Euthanasia. One of the possible reasons why you'd probably want to be part of a cult is to have a group of people embracing you as a member of a family, because you probably feel alone and are losing the will to live. But the Church of Euthanasia actually does the opposite by telling you, nah bro, we think it's a good idea if you unalive yourself. So basically, the Church of Euthanasia isn't necessarily a cult, but is more of a satirical religion that had a popular slogan that says, "Save the planet, off yourself." Essentially, this group wanted everyone to kill themselves because it was the only way to restore balance to the planet, making it the only anti-human religion to ever exist in modern times. The Church of Euthanasia, of course, conducted its own unethical experiments as well, but in a manner that wasn't scientific or psychological. Instead, these human experiments were public demonstrations meant to simulate medical procedures. They blended dark humor with doomsday themes, sparking conversation about how humanity is the biggest plague on the planet. One staged experiment was called Snuff It, which used voluntary offing yourself as a way to control human population. These demonstrations included fake clinical settings and actors and patients that made people uncomfortable with offing themselves, while also making them question what's socially acceptable. It's like the church was walking a fine line between performance art and unethical demonstrations. The reactions were mixed because some people saw the church as a way to open the public's eyes, while others thought these demonstrations and slogans were downright offensive and taboo. Heaven's Gate. If you put together a bunch of people who believe in aliens but also believe in Christianity, you get the Heaven's Gate cult. Its leaders, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, believed their bodies were set to ascend to a higher level of existence to join an alien spaceship following closely behind the Halley-Bopp comet. In preparation for their ascension, the leaders of this cult forced their members to follow a strict lifestyle. The members were told to wear the same clothes and hairstyle, throwing individuality out of the window. Think of yourself having to wear the same clothes as everyone else and basically looking like any other member of the cult, like the minions working under Gru. It worsens because the members are forced to purify their bodies by following strict diets and fasting routines that the leaders believed would help them transcend their earthly forms. But the worst of the worst came when the males were forced to have their balls cut off through castration because the leaders believed that sex was a distraction from transcendence. These experiments were all precursors to the mass suicide that happened during the 90s when 39 members offed themselves in the hopes that their souls would be transported to a spaceship where they would travel the cosmos for all eternity with odd haircuts, skinny frames, and no testicles. Rajneeshpuram. Let's say that you met a charismatic guru named Osho, who became the leader of a group called Rajneeshpuram. You started calling yourself one of the sannyasins, as Osho convinced everyone in the group to join him in an experiment that was supposed to awaken your spirituality. Osho even built a whole city with homes and shopping malls for you and your friends to hang out in. The goal was to build a utopia of spirituality in the middle of Oregon. It sounds nice, but Osho makes everyone in the group join in on an experiment called dynamic meditation. Dynamic meditation is what you get when a gym session and a trance party are combined. You're supposed to go through intense physical movements before you're all supposed to go dead silent to force your mind and body into diving into your true inner self. But these dynamic meditations were meant to force the group members to become more loyal to Osho, who made them believe he was the source of their spiritual salvation. He convinced the group to commit acts of bioterrorism in the locality to incapacitate the voting population so that their own candidates would win the 1984 local elections. Om Shinrikyo. Shoko Asahara was a cult leader with a weird fascination with chemical experiments and warfare. He led a doomsday cult called Om Shinrikyo, which believed that the planet was soon going to meet its end in a huge war. Asahara believed that it was part of his job to jumpstart this massive battle between countries. This cult was widely known for the infamous sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway in 1995. It was just a regular Monday morning as the attack killed 13 people and affected over 1,000 commuters during rush hour in Japan. But the scary part was that this wasn't an isolated incident that came into Asahara's mind in a eureka moment. He and his people were already experimenting on toxic substances because they were obsessed with chemical weapons, believing that the next war was going to focus on biological weaponry. In that regard, the cult built a well-organized chemical weapon production facility to produce different types of toxic substances that they tested on their own members. Asahara was so focused on starting this war that he didn't even care about the people loyal to him, opting to use them as guinea pigs for his chemical weapons. But his terrorist attacks eventually led to his arrest and execution, ending his delusions of a chemical war. Symbionese Liberation Army. While not necessarily a cult, the Symbionese Liberation Army was a cult-like group that made headlines when they kidnapped a rich girl named Patty Hearst. But the shady stuff didn't stop there, because their leader, Donald DeFries, also known as Cinque, started conducting psychological experiments on his members, including Patty. Cinque subjected Hearst to harsh treatment, breaking her down until it became easy for him to manipulate her. He and his other members eventually convinced her to join the SLA. Cinque also recruited other members to his group, using harsh methods and psychological manipulation to convince them of their cause. He wanted an army that was loyal enough to commit murder and assassinations for him. Patty, of course, became one of the biggest cases of Stockholm Syndrome, which is when a kidnapped person either falls in love or develops a psychological bond with their captors. Cinque broke Patty down so hard that she eventually thought, hey, maybe SLA isn't so bad after all, even though he took me from my home and brainwashed me in his group. To that end, she started participating in the group's criminal activities, including bank robberies, even though she could have just asked her rich daddy for some cash. But her transformation from a hostage to an active participant was proof of Cinque's powerful psychological experiments on his members. Scientology. We're not trying to get on Tom Cruise's bad side here. Still, Scientology is one of the most controversial religious movements in the world, often getting flagged as a cult, even though it's had its fair share of celebrity followers. The controversial aspect of this cult can be found in an experiment called auditing. Put yourself in a situation where you're undergoing therapy combined with intense interrogation from a Scientologist. You'll hold on to metal cans connected to a device that measures your spiritual energy as you answer personal questions. You had to answer these questions honestly because, according to the group, it is the only way to achieve true spiritual freedom. But the auditing is far from harmless. Instead, some allegations claim that it can be psychologically manipulative and abusive, forcing participants to reveal personal and traumatic details of their lives. You'll be asked the same questions repeatedly for hours, until the one auditing you sees you breaking down or confessing to some of the things you did in the past. These sessions are also recorded, making them available for the leaders to use against their members, often to blackmail them. It's basically a truth or dare game without the dare, because you'll have to blurt out the truth in an emotional experiment designed to break you down and brainwash you into conforming to the cult's beliefs and practices. Restoration of the Ten Commandments movement. The leaders of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments, a mouthful of a name to say, were essentially scammers who experimented on their believers' vulnerabilities through a series of doomsday prophecies and many different harsh practices. They claimed to have received visions from the Virgin Mary, telling them that the world was about to end. These leaders used these visions to force their members into submitting to their demands, subjecting them to a series of experiments that starved and isolated the members. They went days without eating anything while adhering to a strict schedule of prayer that lasted hours. It's already hard enough to go hours without food, but imagine yourself going for days without minimal nourishment as your mind is preoccupied with an impending doomsday event. These harsh experiments made it easier for the movement's leaders to manipulate their followers through the promise of salvation, claiming that these extreme sacrifices would allow them to enter heaven after the end of the world. But when the leaders' doomsday lies steadily unraveled, they took everyone with them. In March 2000, over 500 members of this cult were killed in a fire started by the leaders as their predictions failed to materialize. It was their way of cleaning up the evidence in the hopes that the members wouldn't go after them for their harsh treatment. Meanwhile, if you're feeling lost in life, we can give you that sense of belonging if you join our Discord. Don't worry, because we are not a cult that's into terrifying human experiments, at least not yet. NXIVM. Let's say you're a young woman who wants to better yourself by joining a self-improvement program involving other like-minded women. However, it turned out to be a huge pyramid scheme designed to trap you in a cult-like environment ruled by a man named Keith Raniere, the leader of NXIVM. Unlike most cults, NXIVM wasn't there for religious purposes. It hid under the guise of a self-help group run by women who only wanted to help their fellow ladies. But it trapped women into a series of experiments designed to twist the minds of these ladies as they continued to recruit more women into the fold. Raniere manipulated these women into following a strict diet that deprived them of a lot of the world's best meals, as they were basically living on air and water. The reason was that Raniere wanted his women to be slender and sexy, because he was regularly sexually abusing them after making them believe that his semen had healing powers. The experiment also worked like a Ponzi scheme, wherein he manipulated women into recruiting younger and fresher new members so that he would have newer women to abuse. Of course, the older members complied, because that would mean Raniere would be more busy with the new members. Luckily for these women, Keith Raniere got caught when some of the members realized that enough was enough. But instead of repenting, he essentially said, "I'll do it all over again," making it clear that he showed no remorse for his actions. Oneida Community. Deep in the forests of New York in the 1800s was a community that existed well before our more modern cults. These people thought outside of the box, engaging in a huge societal experiment that was aimed at creating a master race decades before the Nazis had the same idea. To that end, one of the things that they decided was to get rid of the idea of one-on-one marriage, essentially telling each other, "Hey, let's all just have sex with each other." The terrifying part was that they thought they could create a superior human through a breeding program designed to pair the best and strongest members of the community with one another. So while it may have been true that they were all married to one another, it was also true that the community picked who you could breed with in the hopes of creating the next generation of superhumans with superior genetics. From a group of only 87 members, the Oneida community grew to more than 300 in a span of 30 years of experimental selective breeding. By 1881, the group disbanded and converted itself into a company. It is now known as a large silverware company called Oneida Limited. So while they failed to breed true superhumans, the community succeeded in producing people with a knack for good silverware, and that's still probably a win for them. The Process Church of the Final Judgment. No one took the idea of combining good with bad to an extreme level better than the Process Church of the Final Judgment. At first glance, it looks like a pretty okay cult because it believed in the union of opposites, like embracing both the light and dark sides of existence. Of course, they also believed that God and Satan should be embraced equally. Then again, the cult highlighted evil more than the light side, especially when it came to its recruits. If you wanted to join the Process Church of the Final Judgment, it's like a college frat initiation all over again, but taken to a higher level. Joining the cult meant undergoing tough experiments that were meant to prove your worthiness. You'd have to go on days without sleep and food, while forcing you to endure harsh treatment. The cult believed that going through this experiment would get you one step closer to enlightenment, because pain was divine. But if you wanted enlightenment through pain, you could have just stayed at home stepping on Legos all day. But this cult simply believed that darkness was also a way to purify, forcing its members to confess their deepest fears and most terrifying secrets. Unfortunately for the cult, the leaders embraced the dark side a bit too much, as they had a lot of disagreements that eventually led to the Process Church's disbandment. Order of the Nine Angles. Joining a cult could be a good way for you to learn new life skills, especially if you're looking for a new gig in life. The Order of the Nine Angles may be the right cult for you if you want to be a jack of all trades. After all, they have an experimental program called Insight Roles, which allows you to take on roles as military soldiers, community helpers, and even criminals. Of course, the goal is to turn you into a well-rounded human with new perspectives and insights into different societal roles. But you might have to brace yourself for the violence and manipulation that comes with being a member of ONA, especially because of the experiments you'll be a part of. These experiments, however, are not your usual laboratory stuff. Instead, you'll be placed in an internship-like scenario where the cult will force you to infiltrate groups and communities to disrupt them from the inside and study the reactions and consequences of your actions. What's more unethical than becoming a public school teacher to undermine society by teaching radical stuff to children? Well, that's just one of the strategies the ONA use to bring down society. But hey, at least you'll come out learning a lot of stuff while trying to destabilize the community. Government mind control. You might think that every move you're making is your own will, but some conspiracy theories and cults legitimately believe that we are part of an entire mind control experiment conducted by the government through chemicals and everyday gadgets. The theory suggests that scientists have been secretly working with the government to find ways to control our minds, literally. Whether it's by implanting chips into our brains or putting fluoride in our water, we are essentially puppets on a string, dancing to whatever tune the government is playing. The MKUltra project conducted by the CIA fueled suspicions of mind control conspiracies because the CIA did all sorts of messed up things to control people's minds. So if the CIA had been doing that for years, we can't say for certain that you're only watching this video because the CIA influenced you to. Reptilian elite control. You've probably seen Mark Zuckerberg wearing his emotionless poker face in congressional hearings and other public appearances. Well, it could be because he might not be human at all. Some people think he's part of an ancient reptilian race disguised as humans to live among us. The wild cult conspiracy theory is that there are reptilian humanoids living among us for thousands of years. Some think they're ancient beings on Earth longer than humans, while others believe they are aliens. Either way, they're said to be smarter and stronger than us mere humans. Now, there are stories about people witnessing supposed reptilian people shedding their human form and revealing their scaly appearances. Who knows? Your school principal or your boss could be one of them. Meanwhile, ancient texts and artwork depict these lizard people, fueling the theory that they've been around for as long as time itself. But instead of revealing themselves, they've been lurking in the shadows as a cult and controlling every world event to their benefit. Alien hybridization program. There have been stories about aliens hanging out on Earth with us humans for thousands of years. Some people who are into these theories suggest that ancient texts are proof of this, but it's not just about aliens trying to blend with us while hiding in plain sight. Instead, there's this entire idea that a secret group has been pulling the strings to make half-human, half-alien babies. It's not like an alien Romeo has fallen for a human Juliet and started creating crossbred babies. It's more like they're teaming up behind the curtains to make hybrids who run every major part of the world, including politics, business, and entertainment. So if you've heard Kanye spouting some crazy stuff, you'd probably think he's one of these alien human products. The entire theory has no evidence to back it up at all, but some people swear it's been happening right under our noses for centuries. So if you remember the whole Storm Area 51 frenzy a few years back, you'd be shocked to know that some people were serious about possibly finding an alien human breeding program down there. Hollow Earth theory. You were taught in 5th grade that the Earth is a solid ball that houses us on its surface. However, some theories point to the possibility of a world within our world because the Earth could actually be hollow. They think that there's an entirely different version of the planet inside. Think of it as a secret snow globe within our planet. There's supposed to be a hidden world, complete with its civilization, like a secret underground club that can only be accessed through secret entrances in the North and South Poles. But it's said that going through these entrances isn't easy because it's being guarded by all sorts of gatekeepers, such as secret societies, aliens, and maybe even Godzilla. The point is that a group knows about these entrances to this underground world, but has kept it hidden from the public. But this idea isn't exactly new because ancient cultures, like the Greeks and Vikings, used to talk about these underground realms. There's even talk that the legendary city of Atlantis has always been chilling chilling down there. Mass surveillance. You might want to steer clear of those cheap Huawei phones because they could be secret listening devices used by the communists to keep tabs on everyone around the world. Instead, go for an iPhone. Sure, you know you're still being watched, but at least it's by the good old USA instead of China. There's this entire idea that the government has been teaming up with shady groups to watch and monitor our every move through cameras and mics hiding in plain sight. With the tech we have nowadays, it's not a crazy thought at all. We know that the government wants to keep an eye on possible terrorist attacks and threats to national security, but the cult conspiracy theory takes it to another level by believing that regular people are constantly being watched, even when we're sleeping or showering. As you watch this video, the FBI agent assigned to keep tabs on you knows you've finally realized you're being watched. There may be no evidence, but we are not saying it's not happening. We're all carrying handy listening devices in the form of our smartphones. If your smartphone algorithms, like Alexa or Siri, are listening in, you can bet your house that the government's in on it too. End times prophecies. It's interesting how many groups out there get obsessed with the end of times, especially when their leaders supposedly predicted the world's big finale. These cult conspiracy theories often rely on ancient predictions. On the other hand, most of them relied on the old reliable LSD to get visions of the end of times. But some people look at natural disasters, wars, and political turmoil, saying, "Yup, the end is near." The wilder part is that some cultists are convinced that there's a secret group pulling the strings behind the scenes, setting the stage for the apocalypse. That's why you have all of these doomsday cults hoarding supplies, constructing entire bunkers, and packing weapons like there's no tomorrow. Meanwhile, their leaders manipulate people into thinking that their visions are true, and that the end is upon them. If you remember the Manson family, you'd remember how Charles Manson manipulated his members into murdering with his helter-skelter doomsday scenario. Project Blue Beam. When a world crisis occurs, it tends to be easier for people to come together in panic. It's like they're sheep, ready to be herded by the government. That's precisely what cult conspiracy theorists believe Project Blue Beam is all about. The government supposedly has this advanced tech that can slap holograms of stuff like aliens and religious figures up in the sky. From there, they used advanced audio devices and cranked the volume to make it sound like these beings were talking to us. When E.T. or Jesus is up in the sky talking to people, things can happen in this scenario. First, people will fear these images and interpret them as the coming of an alien invasion or an apocalypse. The second is that people will be more united. Whichever of the two happens, the government will have an easier time controlling people through this blockbuster hoax. The feds will suddenly swoop in and run the show, controlling people behind the shadows by using their paranoia against them. But before looking out your window for holographic aliens in the sky, remember this is just a theory. There is no evidence, and it would be very difficult and expensive for the government to develop technology that can beam aliens and gods into the sky. You're more likely to stumble into a unicorn in your backyard than find proof of Project Blue Beam. Rothschild banking conspiracy. They say that Jews tend to be a bit too stingy when it comes to money, while a lot of the stereotypes about Jews and money can be traced to the Rothschild family, a Jewish clan supposedly controlling the banking industry for hundreds of years. The Rothschilds were powerful people rolling in dough while pulling strings behind every major European event centuries ago. For example, it's rumored that the Rothschilds conspired to spread rumors about Napoleon's victory during the Battle of Waterloo. These OG insider traders used carrier pigeons to spread messages that Napoleon had won the battle, forcing chaos in the stock market. So when stocks started plummeting to earth, the Rothschilds bought all of them dirt cheap. But when the truth came out that Napoleon lost, stock prices shot up, allowing the Rothschilds to emerge from the chaos with the money bags. The rumors don't stop there. Some say that the Rothschilds have been the puppet masters behind powerful governments and large banks, all in pursuit of putting more gold in their vaults. They're Scrooge McDuck swimming in a vast pool of gold, supposedly controlling the global economy while hiding behind different names and identities. Crisis actors. Big disasters and tragic events like mass shootings and terrorist attacks flip through the news regularly. But there's a theory among cults that these incidents were not exactly real, but were carefully staged by the government with the help of what they call crisis actors. Crisis actors are probably the same guys who went to drama school thinking they could make it big in Hollywood, but ended up flipping burgers in your local fast food joint. But they're on the government speed dial because they get hired for a few gigs here and there to play various roles during a crisis. According to conspiracy theories, the grieving relatives or eyewitnesses you see on television are all actors. But the government supposedly does this to make tragic events seem real and totally not staged by the feds. When someone sheds a tear on live television in front of a national audience, the tragedy seems so much more legit. That lady sobbing over her lost husband in a shooting, well, she's just an actress flexing her drama school skills, hoping she could get into a movie. Mandela effect theory. If you've ever remembered something happening only only to find out that it never happened. That's the Mandela effect. It's a term coined in 2010 when people legitimately had memories of Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s, when in reality, he was still alive and only died in 2013. The Mandela effect occurs because of misconceptions about real-life events and people not listening to the 6 o'clock news every night. But cult conspiracies think that something weirder is going on, and it could be evidence of alternate dimensions. According to this theory, some people have false memories because these memories come from a different alternate reality where those memories were legit. For example, some people may have thought that Nelson Mandela did indeed die in the 80s because their memories come from an alternate reality where he actually died. In short, the theory believes that parallel universes collide, mixing false and genuine memories. Think of it like this. You're watching TV, and a bunch of TV stations get their signals crossed with one another, allowing your TV to pick up snippets from each station. That's possibly what would happen if your memories from a different dimension mix up with the events of this current reality. Secret cancer cure. There's nothing more profitable than people fighting for their lives, because people are willing to pay anything to live. The government knows this, and that's why there's a cult conspiracy theory that says that the feds have been keeping the cure for cancer the entire time. Cancer's a pain in the ass because we've lost a lot of people to it. On top of that, it's painfully expensive to get treatments for cancers, but while we've seen the best doctors and medical professionals work tirelessly to help people beat cancer, you know that there are other people out there thinking that the government has been working with hospitals to gatekeep the actual cure to this disease. The theory is that the government wants to milk cancer as much as they can because they know that people are willing to pay for expensive treatments to kick this disease in the butt. So if the cure to cancer ever came out, it's like the government would be flushing money down the drain because a cure would be so much more affordable compared to countless treatments. One reason some people think this theory could be true is that there have been a few promising cancer research projects that haven't seen the light of day. Cancer, of course, is a complex disease that would require more than just a pop of a pill to cure, so it will take time and a lot of money to find a true cure eventually. Blood oaths and pledges. You've just joined a cult, believing that you finally found the family you always wanted. But these guys took the term blood relative a bit too literally, asking you to enter into a blood oath and pledge with them. Suddenly, spending Christmas dinners with your real relatives doesn't sound that bad anymore. In blood oaths, you gather in a dark room, adding a touch of drama to the entire setup. You and a few recruits cut your palms and shake hands with each other and the group's leaders, mixing your blood. It doesn't sound sanitary at all, but this is one of the ways that cults and other exclusive groups show how committed they are. You essentially say, "I'm ready to spill some blood for this group." Blood oaths have been around for thousands of years and are practiced in different cultures to show the strength of their bonds. But it could have also led to infection spreading. Nothing strengthens a bond better than getting sick together. Cults use these oaths to make their members prove that they are all about the mission. Of course, breaking blood oaths has serious consequences because you'll get shunned by the rest of the members. Naked ceremonies. It's your first day in a cult, and you're wondering why you and the rest of the group are getting dragged into a desert in the middle of nowhere. Then, as you all settle down, someone starts stripping down like they were getting thrown $100 bills in a strip club. Soon after, everyone else does it. You just realize that you're in a naked ceremony. Depending on your sex drive, it could either be the best thing to happen to you or the craziest experience you could have. Everyone starts dancing around a flame while chanting some weird stuff. You also notice that the weird couple next to you starts taking LSD, acting all trippy. But naked ceremonies are common in cults that believe that clothes restrict who they are. For them, stripping down allows them to be one with the universe. The dancing and the drugs, of course, makes them feel more spiritual. Whoever started this trend may have just been a dirty old man, or maybe you joined a cult full of perverts. Whatever the case, you might want to bring protection in case a different kind of ceremony happens in the middle of all that bare nudity. Symbolic sacrifices. When you're in a cult, you almost always have to throw away everything you used to be and embrace the new you, which is basically a minion sharing the same brain cell with everyone else in the group. Cult leaders, of course, want to ensure that you've already turned back on the old you. That's when they'd force you to go heavy on symbolic sacrifices. If a cult wants you to fully commit by leaving your old self behind, you're not going to be asked to chuck yourself onto a bonfire. Instead, they're going to want you to toss into the fire or sacrifice something that could be related to who you used to be. Cults want you to see them as their new family, and that's why they may want you to turn your back on your old one by telling you to sacrifice a wedding ring, burn bridges with your family, or in worst cases, burn your actual parents. It's kind of like saying, yeah, you can't hold on to your past anymore, so you might want to throw your old sacred-filled stuff into the flames. That's why those symbolic sacrifices can get a bit personal. Sensory deprivation rituals. Cult leaders have this way of messing with the way you see things. In most cases, they want to change your viewpoint of the world by shaking your senses and forcing you to enter into a trance without the use of your senses. This is when sensory deprivation rituals come in to spice things up for your senses, turning the experience into a mental clusterfudge that may or may not bring the crazy out of you. In these sensory deprivation rituals, you'll get stuck in a tank or room that's pitch black and dead quiet. There are no sounds or anything that could keep your senses occupied. It's just you and your thoughts floating around in the darkness. The whole point of these rituals is to disconnect you from the outside world, forcing your mind to wander in all directions because there's nothing distracting you. But the twist is that it can also be like a psychedelic trip, like you're on LSD or shrooms, because you may hallucinate and see things differently when there's nothing but you and your mind. Those experiences can mess with your head and change how you view the world, often to the benefit of the cult. If you're prone to paranoia, you might even lose your shit while you're deprived of your senses. But hey, if you're deep in a cult, you pretty much have no choice but to take part in these things whether you like it or not. Unusual body modifications. You don't have to visit a plastic surgeon to change the way you look. Instead, you may want to join a cult. If you want to take body modifications to a different level, some cults like altering the way you look, making you the ideal member as far as your beauty, or lack thereof, is concerned. We're looking at an entire ritual in some secret spot like the woods or a hidden basement. Instead of chanting and dancing around a fire, you undergo a body modification ceremony. In most cases, these cults stretch your skin using weights that elongate your earlobes, making you look like a human version of Dumbo. After that, they can tattoo your skin using scars instead of ink, making patterns and symbolic shapes that express your devotion to the cult. Nothing says, "I love this cult," better than permanent scars. Of course, you also get your own set of implants, but not the same ones that the Kardashians have. They put things under your skin to create raised bumps and shapes that make you look like a living sculpture. All of this is to show your dedication and uniqueness to the cult. It might be true that you'd come out of it with a face only a mother would love, but at least your cult will accept you. Vision quests. Cults that are on the mellow and spiritual side of the weirdness spectrum focus more on their connections with the world, as extreme as their methods may be. Of course, to test your spirituality, they will send you out on a vision quest or spirit journey, which may sound like it's straight out of a Disney movie. During a vision quest, you head out into nature, like the woods or the desert, without phones, modern tools, or gadgets. It's just you and the great outdoors, with nothing to distract you. But they don't give you much to eat, because you'll have to fast. Pushing you past the point of hunger is to get you into a deeper state of mind, which is somewhere between starving and fainting. The idea here is that during your time alone, you're supposed to have some vision or spiritual experience to help you understand the next phase of your cultist journey. But it could be that you're just too hungry and starting to hallucinate while you're out there feeding your spirituality with nature's energy. Hopefully it comes with a few calories. Extreme fasting and feasting. There's no better way to lose weight and hit your weight loss goal than joining a cult. That's because these guys have the best meal plan: extreme fasting, followed by an equally extreme feasting. In cases of extreme fasting, you're supposed to be starving yourself for extended periods, like a bad episode of a hunger strike. It's an intense diet plan that's going to leave you all skin and bones after, because the cult won't let you have a single grain of rice to quell the hunger pangs. The reason for this is supposed to be spiritual. If you can't challenge yourself to overcome your hunger, then you're not cool enough to be part of the cult. But it can also lend to health risks and even long-term problems. On the flip side, some cults practice extreme feasting, where you get the ultimate mukbang experience. It's Thanksgiving on steroids, because you have to force massive amounts of food down your gut for a short period, turning the entire spectacle into a food marathon that's going to ruin your diet. The ritual harshly pushes your body to the limit, because it tests your stomach's ability to handle a food coma. As nice as it may sound to be able to eat to your heart's content, this can also lead to weight problems or even a heart attack. Ritualistic flagellation. Not to shame your kink or anything, but ritualistic flagellation is not supposed to be sexual, so you might want to leave your fantasies out of this. Ritualistic flagellation basically involves people whipping themselves or each other as part of a spiritual ceremony. Cults take part in ritualistic flagellation to inflict pain on themselves, believing that it's going to purify their souls. Sometimes it's a way for them to show their devotion to their faith. It's their way of saying, hey, I'm ready to whip myself to show I'm committed to this belief. You might see different people using different things to whip themselves, including ropes and branches. In the most extreme cases, some people use metal chains, believing that they've been so naughty that they only deserve the worst whipping experience possible. Most religions, or even other cults, would look at this practice as a brutal way of showing devotion. Then again, for them, it's a significant way to connect with their beliefs. Group baptisms or immersions. It's not exactly your usual pool party, but it's pretty close. Everyone hops in the water for a good cleansing session, hosted by none other than your cult leader. In group baptisms, or immersions, you all take a spiritual bath in a large pool, or even a natural source of running water, like a nearby stream or lake. And instead of you going for a dive, someone's going to dunk you underwater, sometimes entirely, while the priest or cult leader says some prayers or special words. The purpose of these group baptisms is to press the reset button of your life, because they believe that they're going to cleanse your spirit and give you new life as a member of the cult. The intensity and secrecy behind these group baptisms and immersions can be scary. In some cases, cults pressure you into doing it because everyone else is doing it. Some cults have taken this ritual to extreme levels by making it more about controlling and manipulating its members instead of helping them out spiritually. So what may seem like a refreshing dip in the water is actually a cult's way of rebranding you into one of their puppets. Sleep deprivation trials. Joining a cult may not be the best idea if you want to catch up on some beauty sleep to your mind and body. That's because some cults go through deprivation rituals that will make you miss out on some beauty sleep. In sleep deprivation trials, you'd have to push yourself past your body's usual bedtime and go as far as you can go without any sleep. This would mean drinking tons of coffee and Red Bull while listening to loud music to stay awake. Some cults might even inflict pain on their members to force them to stay alert. While staying awake for a long time may sound like child's play for hardcore gamers, cults do this to prove their dedication to their group. They also believe that going through extended periods without sleep can help them reach a higher state of being. Science has proven that sleep deprivation comes with a set of risks that cults probably don't care about. It can cause memory problems, psychosis, and heart problems. That higher state of being cults talk about is nothing but hallucinations caused by sleep deprivation. Trial by ordeal. Nothing says loyalty to a cult better than walking barefoot through a pile of burning coal while your skin and flesh are cooking. That's the kind of stuff cult leaders want to see from their members in trials by ordeal. When a cult wants to test someone's loyalty and commitment, they tend to take things to different levels of bodily pain, knowing that only the most committed members are willing enough to stick their hands in boiling water, allow venomous snakes to bite their hands, or eat poisoned food. If you're willing to endure the ordeal, you're one of the chosen ones by God, or whoever the cult leader believes in. But at the end of the day, the cult is simply manipulating you in a game that's all about power and control. They're not testing your loyalty. Instead, they're just using these rituals to keep them under their thumb, while making you feel special so you will be more likely to stay in line. It's all just smoke and mirrors, meant to cover up the true nature of most cults, which is about exerting control over the members. Ritualistic scarring or branding. It's a crazy college fraternity party all over again, where you think you're going to have to brand Alpha Kappa Omega symbols on your skin, but instead you're doing it for a cult through ritualistic scarring or branding. Ritualistic scarring or branding in cults isn't just about getting a tattoo. Instead, cults use brands that leave permanent scars on your skin. It's not even a small mark, but a very visible brand that will stick with you for life. Cultists do this to wear it as a badge of honor or as a symbol of belonging to the group. It's a big sign that says, I am part of this weird group of people. In some cases, cults use it to prove their members' dedication because getting branded is downright painful. You might feel pretty awesome sporting your cult symbol, believing you're part of the coolest club ever, but you might want to rethink your decision because those cult leaders are just branding you to make you theirs. Once you've got that mark, you're signing yourself to their ownership forever, like branded cattle on a farm.